There are stories that entertain you, and then there are stories that quietly warn you. This is the second kind. Because this isn't about glamour. It isn't about copying anyone's life. And it definitely isn't about celebrating crime. It's about understanding how power works, how systems fail, and how one human being can slowly lose himself while thinking he's winning. Picture this. A cold night. The power is out. There are no doctors, no medicine, no help. A father is sitting with his young child, watching her shiver uncontrollably from a fever. And instead of reaching for more blankets, he reaches for something else. Stacks of cash, millions of dollars, and he starts burning them. Not for show, not for ego, but because, in that moment, in that cold, dark room, money's the only fuel he has left to create a little warmth. That single image tells you everything you need to know about this story. Because when all the wealth in the world can't buy safety, when immense power can't buy peace, when influence can't protect your own family, then what was it all for? This story begins far away from that desperate night, far away from any hint of luxury or infamy. December 1st, 1949. A small, unremarkable town in Colombia. No headlines were written. No destiny was foretold. It was just a boy, born into an ordinary family. His father was a farmer who worked the land. It was hard labor, long days under the sun, for very little reward. His mother was a school teacher, trying her best to educate children in a country where opportunity was fragile and unevenly distributed. There was no criminal background in his family, no history of shortcuts, but the world around them was deeply unstable. During that era, Colombia was a nation struggling with itself. There was intense political tension, deep social inequality, and weak government institutions. Rules existed on paper, but in reality, they were often ignored. For a child growing up in that environment, one thing became very clear. Very early, hard work did not always lead to dignity. And that quiet realization is a dangerous one. It can plant a seed of cynicism that grows in the dark. As the boy grew into a young man, his family moved to Medellin, a city of breathtaking beauty and stark contrast. Lush green mountains and brilliant sunlight stood right next to sprawling, crowded slums. Luxury neighborhoods with private security existed only a few minutes' drive from places where people had next to nothing. For a young, observant mind, that kind of contrast creates questions. Why do some people have everything, while others struggle for the basics? At school, he wasn't an exceptional student, but he was undeniably confident. He had a habit of questioning authority and challenging the rules. He held onto grudges and remembered every insult. And most importantly, he talked about money constantly. Not because he dreamed of fancy cars or mansions, but because he connected money with respect. To him, wealth meant you could never be ignored, never be looked down upon again. While other teenagers his age dreamed of becoming doctors or lawyers, his dream was brutally simple. To be rich, there were no details. There was no plan. There was just an outcome. That singular focus, that intense desire, slowly began to erode his moral boundaries. The small mistakes came first. Petty theft, minor scams, little wrong choices. And each time he got away with it, each time he escaped consequences, his belief became stronger. The system can be manipulated. That belief is a critical turning point, and it's where many people go wrong, not just criminals, but leaders, executives, and even entire institutions. The moment someone stops believing in accountability, their behavior starts to change in fundamental ways. Over time, he found himself in circles where illegal activity wasn't just an option, it was normalized. It was the way things were done. And in those circles, he learned a critical lesson. No one succeeds alone. Real power comes from networks, from connections, from loyalty. He also noticed something darker, something more potent. He saw that fear commanded attention much faster than respect ever could, and that idea stayed with him, filed away for later use. As the years passed, the world changed. Global trade expanded, and with it, illegal trade did too. One product in particular began attracting massive attention, not because of some cultural fascination, but because of its astronomical profit margins. He didn't invent it. He didn't create the demand for it. He simply noticed the opportunity. At first, He played a small role in the background. He handled logistics, made connections, and managed the movement of goods. But all the while, he was watching. He was studying the entire operation. Who controls the supply? Who controls the distribution? And most importantly, who controls the profit? He quickly understood that real influence comes from control, not just participation. Gradually, he began to structure his operations. He created backup plans, redundancies, and a clear chain of command. This was no longer chaos. It was a system. It was a business. And with any large-scale system, you inevitably face ethical crossroads. Instead of trying to confront the corruption that existed, he decided to absorb it, to make it part of his business model. Government officials were paid off. Rules were bent. Silence was purchased. And in the places where cooperation failed, intimidation and violence filled the void. This is where the story turns darker. Because once fear becomes a tool, it never stays controlled. It has a way of spreading, of infecting everything it touches. Trust disappears. Violence escalates, and human life becomes secondary to profit and power. Yet, at the very same time, he was building a completely different public image. He was seen in poor communities, funding schools, building soccer fields, and providing housing for families who'd been forgotten by the state. This wasn't purely out of kindness, it was a strategy. Public support creates a powerful shield. To many struggling families, he looked like a hero, a modern-day Robin Hood. A solution in a broken system. This dual identity created a deep confusion across the country. Was he a protector of the poor, or was he a destroyer of peace? The nation was divided. Eventually, he sought the one thing his money couldn't yet buy: legitimacy. He entered politics, seeking power without the need for secrecy. But public life brings scrutiny. His past couldn't stay hidden. Journalists and politicians started asking questions. His past actions resurfaced, and ultimately, he was rejected by the very system he wanted to join. That rejection didn't humble him. It hardened him. It was a declaration of war. When the formal institutions pushed back against him, the conflict escalated to an unimaginable scale. Fear blanketed entire cities. Daily life became a game of chance. Innocent people suffered terribly not because they chose a side, but because they were simply caught in the middle of a storm they didn't create. Eventually, the pressure became too much to bear. It came from within the country, from a government pushed to its limits, and it came from outside, from international forces. A deal was finally made. He would surrender, but on his own terms, without being sent to another country. But even his surrender was an exercise in control. He designed his own prison, which was more of a resort. Isolation didn't exist. Authority was just an illusion, and when that illusion finally cracked, he escaped. The final chapter of his life was not glamorous. It was chaotic, lonely, and utterly exhausting. It was a life on the run, constant movement, constant fear with enemies closing in from all sides. The immense wealth remained, but safety had completely vanished. And that brings us back to that cold night. The sick child, the powerless father, the money being burned not as a symbol of power, but as a final act of desperation. Soon after that night, the story ended, not in a palace surrounded by luxury, but on a simple rooftop in a middle-class neighborhood. His fall divided the nation all over again. Some mourned the man they saw as a benefactor. Others felt a wave of relief, hoping for peace. But the deeper damage remained. The distrust, the trauma, and an entire generation shaped by fear. And here's the truth that matters most today. This story is not a blueprint to be admired. It is a warning to be understood, because power without limits ultimately destroys the person who holds it.